tier lists are always interesting, and you pretty much always have to take them with a grain of salt because you can't really get into all the variables for all the different reasons for why certain things are put into certain categories. For previous expansions, tier list is something that I've made as well. And for the War Within, we're going to do the exact same thing. And I'm going to try to stay as unbiased as possible for the professions that I enjoy, and just talk a little bit about why I think certain professions are better than others for certain things. And it's going to be from a perspective of the maximum potential from a profession. So that includes cross-realm activities, that includes alt army activities, and that also includes like how much you can do on a solo character, like the versatility of a single profession. And just to start, right, just remember again to take this with a grain of salt, just because it's totally up to you what you want to do, what you want to focus on, what kind of a profession that you enjoy. This is purely for fun, but also kind of informative reasons. But to start, I think I'm going to start with the gathering professions, because the gathering professions are the ones that are the starting period for a lot of players when it comes to gold making. And herbalism and mining, those are the ones that we're going to start with. Herbalism actually is in quite a good spot in the War Within, because we have mulching and we have seeds. Seeds, something we had in Dragonflight as well, which is pretty interesting, because with seeds in Dragonflight, we had rich soil, which is where you planted your seeds, which turns into herbs. But in the War Within, we have only one location compared to Dragonflight. It's all over the place, and the spawn rates of it was kind of bad. You couldn't always figure it out. But in the War Within, we have one location, and they continuously spawn over and over and over again. So you can actually get to use all the seeds that you have at one location, which is great. Besides that, you have mulching, which is you use a certain amount of materials to gain more of another herb. So you use some herbs to gain more of another, which is another pretty great system. And as a gathering profession, I think because of those two reasons, it does get itself higher than mining, because mining is just pure gathering. There's nothing like herbalism received. I'm probably going to put it in D, mining, and then herbalism is going to get a C. I think D for mining is perfect, because mining is just mining. You go out, you pick up ore, and obviously your profession tree talents, they matter for how good you are collecting certain types. But there's not really much else interesting about the profession, and there's not much scalability. It doesn't really matter if you have multiple characters with mining, unless you're doing multi-accounts. But still, even then, it puts itself quite low. It does have some interesting things with the materials that you collect it because of some of the zones, but I still think it's pretty low in general for the maximum potential and versatility of a profession. But herbalism is higher because it has a couple more systems that does make it slightly more interesting. Now, we also have skinning. Skinning is in a similar spot as to what we had in Dragonflight. You have the opportunity to make some bait for fishing, which does make it a little more versatile. And then you have, like, obviously just your regular skinning activities, whether it's elites or harder mobs or regular mobs. But it does give you an opportunity to do a lot of different potential farms, a lot of different locations. It opens up for a lot of that, which I think is good. And that also opens up for certain farming locations that are good for humanoids and not only beasts. So it does prove a little more versatile, because you can use it in a lot of different situations compared to mining and herbalism, where you most likely have to follow certain routes. So I think that's going to get a C as well, just because of that. It's not going to be in the same tier as mining. I wouldn't put it there, at least. And yeah, I feel like I'm pretty comfortable with putting skinning in C. We also have cooking and fishing. Fishing is actually fishing. These are secondary professions, which means they're more versatile than pretty much every single other profession in the game. And fishing is actually getting a good amount of love in the world within. There's going to be 20 different fish to farm, and not only that, you're going to have the option to farm some Dark Moon cards, which we also had kind of an option to do in Dragonflight. And then there's a lot of cosmetics that you can actually fish. So you have the opportunity to farm materials and pieces of gear for cosmetics. And you have the option of farming pieces for gear as well, like actual useful gear, like Dark Moon trinkets. So that does actually put fishing in a pretty good spot. The only problem with fishing is the fact that these fish don't have qualities to them, so they're limited in that factor. But because there's 20 fish, there's a lot of potential markets that you can actually get into. And fishing, again, it's a little more interesting for the War Within, because if you really want to min-max fishing, you have to actually fly around and look for pools this time around. You can't just stand still in one location and be happy, done and dusted with it. It's used for a lot of consumables. There's a lot of consumables like food and stuff like that. It's going to be used for. I think mining is a little more versatile though. So I'm probably also going to put fishing here, but behind mining, not in front of mining. It's still very low because of how much time you actually have to fish, and it's something that you have to be pretty active about, like actively pay attention to. And it's a lot of work to set up too, but it's still on the lower end because you don't have, you are limited to how quickly you can fish. There's not like crafting where you can craft into a bunch of different markets. Obviously you can farm a bunch of different things, but it's limited because of just the speed you can farm things at. Now for cooking, on the other hand, cooking is going to touch every single piece of food consumable that exists. And that also does use something from fishing, so it's a good combination. But cooking is insanely versatile. Is it going to be better than gathering professions? Well, if you have enough gold to invest into the materials that you actually need to make a lot of this food, cooking has the potential to go absolutely crazy, right? And you can technically just stick around in one, like in the main city. You don't even need knowledge points for this, right? So setting it up is going to be a lot easier than most other professions. It's going to require a lot less work. So I actually think personally that cooking is it's better than all the gathering profession because of the fact that you can actually be so versatile, and it's a crafting profession, which means the amount that you can make will be totally based on the demand, right? That's the same thing for gathering professions, but gathering professions are limited as to how fast you can farm something. So if it sells way faster than you can actually farm it, it's not the same, right? And cooking, you can just keep crafting and selling if that's the case. And in a lot of situations, especially also in Dragonflight, which is a very similar system, we had a case where you just couldn't keep these consumables up on the auction house quick enough, so people were having multiple accounts. So I think this deserves a higher spot than the gathering professions. But this is where it gets interesting. This is where we get to crafting professions, and some of them do have some farming capabilities as well, which puts them a little higher in my book because of the versatility of the profession. But we're just going to start from one side to the other. We have tailoring right here. Tailoring has the opportunity to craft 15, I believe it's 15 different bags this time around, where the vast majority of them, like 12 of them, are, or 11? I don't remember exactly how many it is, but there's a profession bag for every single profession in the game, which is really good. It gives you an equip bonus that will increase random things depending on the profession, but it does make each and every profession just a little bit better at doing something. So it's not going to matter for everyone, but it is going to matter for certain builds early on. And that's really important. I think that's interesting because, you know, you have the opportunity to sell 2 of these profession bags, because 2 primary professions for every single character that has professions. Not only that, we also have the new regular bags, and they always do well. It's not the most profitable profitable market in the world, but it's very, very easy, and there's no quality connected to bags, right? So bags is mostly based on resourcefulness and things like that, but it is a very good and strong market because of the fact that you don't need to worry about quality. So that's really important. And then you have the gear crafting side of tailoring, and you have the farming side of tailoring. I actually think tailoring is in a really, really strong spot because it's not the only way, but it's the primary way to get cloth. If you are a player in the War Within and you go around killing humanoids, which is what would usually drop cloth, if you don't have tailoring, you will not get any cloth pieces from humanoids. You can get some from webbed ore deposits in mining, but that's a very, very low amount per hour, and it's also only really if you farm in Ashkahets. So that's a little not so great. And then you have the opportunity to do thaumaturgy in alchemy to also get a little bit of cloth, or you do a certain transmutes that can get you a little bit of cloth. But it's nothing compared to how much you can actually farm with tailoring. But again, that is limited to how fast you can farm it. Farming in general is not the best quality for professions because it's not almost infinitely scalable, because your time is limited, right? The amount of stuff that you can craft in an hour is way more than you can farm in an hour. And that you can increase with cross-realm selling, and that's going to be even easier to do because of warp band banks in the War Within. But you have the opportunity to create a very strong cloth farming build, and because you barely get any cloth from any other place than that, it's a big deal, right? It's a really, really big deal. We're going to see a lot less cloth than usual. And then besides that, you have the gear crafting side of it, which is always great. If you want to do work orders, but also for patron orders, like NPC work orders, that's important. And then there's the consumables as well. You get the option of crafting a couple of consumables, like spell threads, certain toys and things like that. And then you have intermediate materials. You can craft like bolts, and you have daily cooldown crafting bolts in tailoring. Now, how good those are going to be is still a little early to tell, but they're used for all the profession bags, and they're also used for some of the gear crafting situations. So they're going to be valuable no matter what. That's just how it is. So I would rank tailoring probably S tier. I don't know if I would say that tailoring is the best profession, but maybe it's A tier, because some of the other professions actually have the opportunity of crafting for multiple armor classes. So we're going to put tailoring at A tier. It's a very close S tier, I think. I would say it's a very close S tier. We're going to go leatherworking next, and that's actually what I was just talking about. Leatherworking has the opportunity for crafting leather gear and mail gear. So for gear crafting purposes, it's absolutely insane, okay? That's the widest spread of stuff that you can actually craft for. So I would probably go for that just because of that. But also in leatherworking, you have the opportunity of crafting intermediate materials. And again, this is crafted materials, but there's like 5 or 6 different crafted materials in leatherworking, which is a lot. And because of concentration coming up, giving you every single thing that has a quality is going to be impacted by concentration, and concentration is a time-gated resource. So everything that has a quality is technically a daily crafting cooldown. So you could have multiple alts for leatherworking to really min-max it early on. So it's an incredibly versatile profession because of that. And you give yourself the option to craft leather and mail gear and a bunch of intermediate crafting materials. For that reason, I'm going to put it higher than tailoring. Just because a lot of what you get out of tailoring also requires you to farm because of the farming build for cloth. Because there's not any really other valuable ways to get cloth. And you don't have the problem with that with leatherworking because that's something that skinning does. Completely different profession. And then we go into jewel crafting. Jewel crafting is a rough one, right? Because we have We have shattering, or crushing rather, and then we also have prospecting, and those are always going to be great. And consumables are a major part of jewel crafting, and just because of the fact that people swap out their gems, especially in early seasons or early patches for major patch releases, there's a lot of gems that sell. That's important. But not only that, in jewel crafting for the War Within, we're getting another tiered socket medallion, kind of like what we had in Dragonflight, which is just an item that lets you add more sockets to certain pieces of gear, which is really important. And that's something that most people are going to want. Let's see, what else do we have? I mean, obviously the fact that gems are a thing, that's important. But in Dragonflight, you had your unique gems, right? Your unique purple gems, the main stat gems. Those are something that you actually had to interact with the work order system to do. But in the War Within, they are going to be BOE, so you can actually sell them on the auction house. And me personally, that's a little biased to say, I don't really enjoy the work orders very much. So more things moved away from the work order systems, that's just better. Like, that's just immediately set at a higher pace. I'd say there's not a lot of downsides to jewel crafting. You don't get the opportunity to make your own diamond anymore. That's a synthetic diamond that you actually get out of Alchemy, which we'll talk about later. But other than that, you get to have your own ecosystem if you obviously buy the ore. But you have a lot of options because of the consumables, and you also get the opportunity to craft a little bit of gear, which actually is pretty relevant. A little bit of gear for rings and necklaces. So I would say I'm probably also going to put jewel crafting pretty high at an A tier. I don't think I want to put it ahead of tailoring. Prospecting does give you the option to shuffle some materials through and craft your different materials for like crafted materials like we talked about earlier. But I don't think it sits in a better position than tailoring does, because tailoring also has the opportunity to do unraveling for spools, and we're going to have 3 different kinds of cloth as well, which is really important to think about. So yeah, I'm gonna leave it here behind tailoring for now. Then we have Inscription. Inscription is actually a profession that I'm not really super fond of myself. But Inscription does have some interesting talent points this time around. We're going to get Darkmoon decks again. And there's actually some farming builds in Inscription, giving you the opportunity to get higher drop chances and more in general of Darkmoon cards when you're out farming. In the same position as cloth is where you can get cloth, this is going to be the main way that you actually get your Darkmoon cards. And in previous expansions, we've seen it through, we have to do milling or whatever, shuffle through some materials. But this time, it's actually also something that you can farm, which is pretty interesting. And then you have your Triatus situation, which is really important. It's a knowledge point that every single person is going to get, or at least want to get, every single time it's available. So that's a pretty important item, which puts it actually way higher than a lot of other potential professions, because it impacts them in that way, because knowledge points are super important. Especially because in the War Within, they are somewhat capped. We're not going to have a system like Dragon Shards. So it's a tough one. I mean, it's in a very, very strong position just because of all the opportunities that you have, like in Inscription, because you also get the opportunity to craft a couple of different pieces of gear, but not that that's really important. You have all your missives as well. Optional reagents are king. Those are something that you actually are really going to be excited about, so I wouldn't sleep on those. I think Inscription is going to be in a good point because of that. It's a very versatile profession, whether you want to use it to farm, or you want to use it for shuffling materials, or you want to use it for creating consumables like optional reagents and things like that. There's a lot of potential stuff that you can do here. A lot of very interesting different markets. I think I'm going to put it also at an A tier. I'm not putting it at S tier. It's also not B. It's not bad enough for that. So we're going to leave it there. I think I'm pretty happy with that. Now, engineering. Engineering has... Here's my opinion about engineering. Engineering is still in a spot where I feel like it's always... It's been for a very long time. And it's like, you can kind of make gold with it, but it's nowhere near as good as some of the armor crafting professions. Like, the armor crafting professions are just almost superior in every single way possible. Engineering is going to have some new tinkers and new on-used consumables that you can use for like damage things and stuff like that for Mythic Plus and raids. So that's going to be interesting. That's an interesting new system. And then there's a new engineering mount, and that is interesting. But the way that you actually get to learn a lot of the recipes in engineering is very RNG related. So you could get really unlucky and not get a lot of the better or greater recipes in the profession and get time gated even more on that. So I don't necessarily think I would rate this very high from an expansion launch perspective, because if you only want to play a couple of characters and you really, really get destroyed on your RNG luck for this profession, you have no chance of keeping up. Absolutely no chance. You can help a little bit with the knowledge points that you get, and there are some other options. Like, there's a couple of different things that you get to craft that makes it slightly interesting. But I think this is also, for me, I mean, you have your helmets and your couple of other things, and there's some potential for shuffling materials. And engineering is also going to be very good for profession gear, like accessories and tools. So if you like doing that, then that's good. There's a little bit of versatility in it, but this might be more also just me being biased in my perspective, but I think I'm going to put that in a B tier because of how much RNG is going to be the cause of this profession. I wouldn't put it very high. Yeah, I don't know. I don't like that. I kind of like RNG for certain systems, but if it's the baseline for whether or not your profession is going to be good early on, and you have the option of making multiple alts with this, but then you just waste your time if you get really unlucky. Of course, if you get lucky, then that's good, but I would much rather pick a profession where I know what I'm going to potentially get out of it. So, I'm putting it comfortably at a B. Rage at me all you want in the comments. Enchanting. Enchanting, good old enchanting. This is, one of the best consumable professions there is. Same thing goes for gems, but enchants, everybody needs to enchant for almost all your pieces of gear. Enchants are just going to be good no matter what, right? Certain enchants are going to be better than others, but that's going to be good. Not only that, in Enchanting, in the War Within, we're going to actually get a bunch of cosmetics. They're called like Gleeful Glamours. And they give you an option to look like any race that you want in the game, which is a really, really cool cosmetic, like consumable. And there's quality ranks, quality 1, 2, and 3, and it's either 20, 40, or 60 minutes. And a lot of players are going to want those, right? So if you don't want to go for the consumable side of enchants, you can go for the illusions, right? The Gleeful Glamours. And if you don't want to do that either, you have the opportunity of going into Disenchanting. And Disenchanting is actually very specific for the War Within this time around. And it's focused on each, like, rarity. So you can put points into being good at disenchanting green pieces or blue pieces or purple pieces, right? Uncommon, rare, or epic. And I think that's good. You have a lot of versatility because of that. And I'm also slightly biased because I really like the thematics of what enchanting is in an RPG. But I think because of that, and it's also consumables, so it's not a one-time thing, especially for something like crafting gear until you need the higher eye level version of something. And that's the thing about enchanting too. We're going to get enchanted crests again, which are the pieces that you need to upgrade your eye level in a certain piece of gear, and enchanting is going to have those again. So every single person that wants a piece of crafted gear at a higher eye level in endgame is going to have to go through enchanting. So because of that, I actually think that this is one of the most versatile professions in the entire game. So I'm actually going to put it at S tier. I'm not going to put it in front of leatherworking. I'm going to put it in front of leatherworking. You can rage at me all you want. I think that for the War Within, but also in general, this is the best, if not one of the best professions in the entire game, especially for making gold, but also just for fun thematics. And then we have blacksmithing. Blacksmithing is, yet again, in a great position. You have a lot of crafted gear opportunities in here. You also have weapon crafting. There's a bunch of that. And then on top of that, you have your intermediate crafts for like crafted materials. And those are going to be good. We have alloys, again, like 4 or 5 different ones. So that's, obviously really, really, really important. So I would definitely put blacksmithing pretty high because of all those options. You have, there's a lot of versatility options because of that. And there's not only that, actually the crafted gear for blacksmithing is super awesome as well. It looks really good. So for future expansions, you actually have almost a certainty of this being good to collect. There is the downside of the fact that it's going to take forever to actually max out the profession. And it also does get a new system, which is called Ever-Burning Forge or Ever-Burning Ignition, 2 different styles of it, which is a craftable buff that you can use, and it increases 3 different profession stats, which for the longevity of the profession is actually pretty good. But besides that, crafting materials and crafting some gear, it doesn't do much else than that. So I'm not going to put it higher than... I'm actually probably going to put it right in between Jewelcrafting and Inscription. It's still pretty high just because it's a gear crafting profession, and those are just great. They're just so much better than so many other things. And if you're first to market, or if you really stocked a trade chat, you can make an outrageous amount of gold, or if you get the right recipes or whatever it is, you have a lot of options with professions like this. And even if that doesn't work out, you can go into materials. But as I talked about earlier, anything that has a quality in the game is going to be technically a daily crafting cooldown because of the fact that concentration takes time to recharge. So there's a lot of niche opportunities to focus on certain recipes and certain crafts. And the more that you have in a profession, the more options you have. And gear crafting professions are just going to take the cake even more, because of the fact that, they have all the gear, and then they also have some opportunities for crafting materials as well. And then like tailoring and Inscription, you also have the opportunity to farm certain materials and not only craft certain materials. So that's good. That's amazing. And then we have Alchemy. This is automatically going to be super high. Alchemy is always one of those professions that is rated super high, and it's always one of those professions that Blizzard gives the most love. But here's the thing. Alchemy has gotten a new system in the War Within called Thaumaturgy. And that system lets you turn almost any kind of material, 20 materials, into others, right? Thaumaturgize? Whatever you want to call it, right? I'm sure you guys are going to correct me. It's usually how it goes. But you can take any 20 materials and turn it into something else. Obviously, those are very specific kinds of materials, and sometimes it's also byproduct that you use in alchemy. But the thing is, that opens up for like 20 or 25 different shuffle potentials for materials, which means you have so many different options for potential gold making areas in that just one system in alchemy. Not only that, a lot of the byproduct that you actually get out of thaumaturgy is used for experimentations, but it's which is where you get a lot of your recipes for crafting files and potions, which is another great thing about alchemy. You can craft a lot of consumables, not only materials, or shuffling into materials. And here's the other thing. We're also getting transmutes again, and we're getting more than ever before. Well, not more than ever before, but we're getting a wide range of transmutes. And they are obviously some daily cooldowns, which you can make better through profession talents. But it does let you take, so like you use thaumaturgy to take a certain kind of material that might be very cheap to turn it into byproducts. And when I say byproducts, there's actually different kinds of it. Right, you can see here mercurial transmutation and then volatile transmutation, and these are all soul-bound things, so that's really important to keep in mind. But those can be used in transmutes to craft you more of those other byproducts that you use to make materials. And not only that, alchemy also has the option to make blasphemite, and blasphemite is the new diamond. It's just a synthetic version of it. But that is what you use as a baseline for unique, like purple gems, like the main stat gems that everyone's going to want at least one of. Now, however much it's going to cost to craft, it's still going to be something that people are going to want. So there's going to be a price tag on it. But because of the fact that the profession on pretty much every single other aspect has qualities on it, you can actually use concentration, as I talked about again, on every single one of those markets. And because there's so many shuffle opportunities in that profession, and even if you decide to go into consumables, you also have the opportunity for every single one of the files or the potions or the oils or whatever it is. You have the opportunity to actually use your concentration in each and every one of those to make even more on your profit margins for whatever you're crafting. So I would say that alchemy currently looks like the best gold making profession when you talk about versatility, when you talk about longevity, and when you talk about the infinite scalability of this particular profession. Not only that, every single item almost that you make in alchemy is a commodity, right? It's a stackable item, which goes on the regional auction house, which means very fast moving. So it doesn't actually matter whatever server that you're on, unlike the gear professions, because if you're crafting gear, then you're going to have to interact with the work order system, and you can kind of interact with certain other servers if you do guild work orders, but that's a lot to set up with random individuals, especially if they're already part of a guild. They probably don't want to deal with that. So gear crafting is really only good on really popular servers where people are actually going to interact with the work order system, which is why I think alchemy actually deserves the #1 spot for probably the best profession, or at least looks to be the best profession for the War Within. But yeah, I'd say I'm pretty comfortable with this list right here, and this is in order from left to right in every single one. That's how I would do it. But I don't know, what are you guys excited about? What kind of professions are you going to do? Again, remember to take this with a grain of salt, because obviously some of these professions could be a lot better for you because you enjoy them a lot more than certain other ones. Like if you really enjoy gathering in the game but you hate crafting or standing still in the city, then the gathering professions are going to be better for you, and vice versa. So just remember that. This is more of a fun video. But if you did make it all the way to this point in the video, I greatly appreciate it. And type down in the comments, let's see, we're going to randomly look at something, phone. Type phone down in the comments below, because that's, I have my phone right next to me. Then I know that you watched all the way to this point. But I greatly appreciate you guys for watching. Remember to drop a like on the video, subscribe to the channel with all the notifications on so you don't miss future videos. And as always, I'll see you on the next one.